So I wanted to start something a little new with the channel. I want to start a series of videos that I'm going to call On Your Right. In this series, I will take a look at articles and recent events that help highlight how our personal rights, our civil rights, and our natural rights are being eroded. It is my hope that this series helps you understand that our rights are always being tested and we must protect them. The best way to protect our rights is to use them freely. With that in mind, let's get started. So now that we're in the midst of the Democratic National Convention, a recent article by Vox.com caught my attention. It is entitled, "Democrats are finally playing offense on gun control." Democrats are no longer afraid of guns. After several election cycles in which Democrats rarely pushed gun control as a big issue, the third night of the Democratic National Convention showed us just how much that's changed. In one night, big-time gun control advocates, former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg, former Representative Gaffe Gifford, and Senator Chris Murphy, among others, were slated to put a spotlight on the issue in a long segment dedicated to ending gun violence. In the White House, she will stand up to the gun lobby. Gifford, who was shot in an assassination attempt in 2011, said of Hillary Clinton, "That is why I'm voting for Hillary." Well, congratulations for no longer being afraid of guns, although you really shouldn't have been in the first place. Heck, you're surrounded by them all day long by your armed security guards. And now Michael Bloomberg, an individual who wants to ban sodas, wants to enact gun control legislation? This cannot end well. Ms. Gifford is there only because she was a victim of gun violence, not because she's some champion of gun reform, but rather the unfortunate victim. Jared Loughner, Ms. Gifford's assailant, abused substances regularly, including cannabis, mushrooms, LSD, and other hallucinogenic drugs. To me, this doesn't sound like a gun control issue, but rather a substance control issue. But let's continue on with the article. It is a significant moment in terms of policy and politics. The research shows restricting access to guns can save lives, and advocates now have a big political party behind their cause. In fact, they have a party that is willing to go on the offense, putting the issue front and center at the big night of their convention. Time and time again, speakers on a night dedicated to national security drew some of the many haunting statistics related to guns. The 92 gun deaths in America every day, the 33,000 a year, the multiple mass shootings that have happened over the past few years, and so on. It was a clear message. The federal government must act on guns. Yes, 33,000 firearm-related deaths is a horrible statistic, but 60% of those are from suicides. Perhaps rather than focusing on the mechanism somebody uses to end their life, how about we focus on the reason why they choose to end their life? And when you look at the statistics, the United States has one of the lowest per capita suicide rates in the developed world. So what countries have the highest suicide rates? The ones with the most restrictive and totalitarian style governments. And those style of governments usually have the harshest and most restrictive gun control laws. It was a long, winding road to get here, though. Since the assault weapon ban, which later passed in 1994, Democrats have played it fairly conservative on guns, fearing that it was a losing issue for them. It took recent events for this to change. Notably, 2016 is the first presidential election since the mass shootings of Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut, that killed 20 children and 6 adults. Based on polling alone, Democrats have long had the public behind them when it comes to gun control. According to the Pew Research Center surveys, most people in the United States support universal background checks, bans on assault-style weapons, bans on high-capacity ammunition clips, bans on online sales of ammunition, and a federal database tracking gun sales. Okay, let's break that last sentence down. Yes, most people do support having universal background checks. But what you don't realize is that every gun sale, no matter through a federal firearms license broker or through a shop or at a gun show, has to go through a federal background check. There is no gun show loophole. It's a total fallacy. There is literally only one type of sale that can avoid a federal background check, and that is a person-to-person sale, one in which I personally know you and I choose to sell you my firearm. This is the only exception to the rule. However, the sale still must be recorded and receipted. ban on assault-style weapons. What is an assault-style weapon? Just because it looks mean doesn't mean it does any more or any less damage to a human being. And if you try to say that a semi-automatic weapon is an assault weapon, no, a semi-automatic weapon is just a firearm that shoots one round every time you pull the trigger once. And trying to ban high-capacity ammunition clips is redundant. People just reload. People can reload very fast. Banning on online sales of ammunition? Heck, this is where you get the best deal. But the most insidious part is having a federal database to track gun sales. This is where gun confiscation starts. It's a very slippery slope. Just look at Australia. They started with a registration, then it went to a mandatory buyback program, which basically means you have to turn your guns in. But let's read on to see what else they think. But Democrats have long tried to keep away from the issue. There are two big reasons why. For one, gun right advocates have historically been far more passionate about this issue. As Republican strategist Grover Norquist said in 2000, the question is intensity versus preference. You can always get a certain percentage to say they're in favor of some gun controls, but are they going to vote on their control position? Probably not, Norquist suggested, but for that 4 or 5% who care about guns, they will vote on this. And that's really what it comes down to, about 4 or 5% of the population that really want to control and dictate other people's lives. They are fine stomping on your rights, so long as they get their way. Christian Goss, a political scientist and author of The Gun Debate, What Everyone Needs to Know, previously suggested that a key driver of this heightened passion is a sense of tangible loss. Gun owners feel like the government is going to take away their guns and rights. In comparison, gun control advocates are motivated more by abstract notions of reducing gun violence. Though, Goss noted, the victims of mass shootings and their families have been putting a face on these policies by engaging more actively in advocacy work, which could make the gun control movement feel more relatable. To compound this, Democrats have attributed, rightly or wrongly, several big election losses to the support for gun control. Mike Ellis and Sarah Ferris reported for The Hill. Well, Christian, I hate to say it, but they're right. They see their rights chipped away one piece at a time. Eventually, they can see their guns removed. The party rejoiced after enacting an assault weapons ban under President Clinton in 1994. But when Republicans trounced them at the polls later in that year, many attributed the defeat to the gun debate. In similar fashion, Al Gore was stung for embracing gun reform as he sought the White House in 2000, including West Virginia and his home state of Tennessee, where voters were exceedingly wary of his gun positions. But based on the third day of the Democratic convention, this has changed. Well, I would say Al Gore was stung pretty bad. He lost his home state. Voters are not as dumb as you think they are. They can read the writing on the wall, and they can read between the lines. And no, they don't want their rights removed or stomped on. In December 2012, just a month after President Obama won re-election, gunmen walked into Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut, and killed 20 children and 6 adults and himself. The shooting was absolutely horrifying, pushing Democrats and some Republicans to mount a new effort to pass gun control legislation and prevent more horrifying acts of violence. The effort failed, but with every new mass shooting, most recently the deadliest, which took place at a gay nightclub in Orlando, Florida, Democrats have continued their push for new gun control legislation. And with the polls on their side and mass shootings after mass shootings grabbing national headlines, they feel confident that the public is really on their side. Well, first off, the shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School was done by a lunatic who was on psychotropic medicine, who murdered his mother and then stole her firearms to go commit this horrible, heinous act. Tell me one law that we could put on the books that would prevent this person from killing all these people. There simply is not one. And to curtail somebody else's freedoms and rights, just to, in the theory, maybe, possibly prevent some sort of heinous act in the future, is misguided. Secondly, the gay nightclub shooting in Orlando, Florida, was motivated primarily by Islamic fundamentalist terrorism. Omar Mateen was radicalized and brainwashed by the most fundamentalist teachings of Islam. These teachings are extreme and misguided. But with the recent knife attacks in Europe, we should start to realize it's really not the weapon of choice that matters. It's the reason behind it that really matters. In some ways, the focus on mass shootings misses the big picture. These attacks make up a small fraction of gun deaths, less than 2% in 2013, and the evidence for gun control is much better for preventing suicides and other types of gun violence. But as painful as this might be to say, suicides don't infringe on other people's rights and liberties. Still, these shootings are, obviously, completely horrific, and they feed into the idea that they could happen to anyone, even kids at an elementary school. Democrats have latched onto the horror these shootings produce to push their message. After Orlando's shooting, for example, Democrats in Congress mounted an enormous effort to force votes on gun control legislation, which included a congressional sit-in. The bills they proposed ultimately failed, but it was a drastic display of how far Democrats are now willing to go on this once taboo issue. And why did their bills fail? Because they were also violating other fundamental rights, like the Fourth Amendment. And this is being spearheaded by the party that's supposed to represent and protect all freedoms. Hillary Clinton said, "If you're too dangerous to get on a plane, you're too dangerous to buy a gun in America." The people on the no-fly list have no recourse. It is not justifiable to put somebody on a list and curtail their rights without having some sort of legal recourse to battle that list. This would be like being thrown in jail with no trial and no way to prove your innocence. That's not our system. Our system is innocence before proven guilty. President Obama, too, has repeatedly spoken about this issue, given sorrowful speeches after every mass shooting, and remarked on how his inability to pass new gun control measures is his biggest disappointment in office. He told BBC, "If you ask where has been the one area that I feel I've been most frustrated and stymied, it is the fact that the United States of America is the one advanced nation on earth in which we do not have sufficient common sense gun safety laws, even in the face of repeated mass killings." Well, Mr. President, I have to respectfully disagree. We do have sensible, reasonable gun control laws. They just simply need to be enforced. Democrats are essentially channeling this frustration, which resurfaces after every other tragedy they feel could have been prevented or at least made less likely by embracing gun control at the Democratic Convention. But as old as some of these feelings may be in the face of America's horrific levels of gun violence, the total embrace of this issue is relatively recent, tied to mass shootings that have become so familiar to Americans. "My eldest son is the same age as those kids killed in Sandy Hook," Senator Murphy said. "He just finished first grade. My wife and I are the same age as those parents. And I'm furious. I'm furious that in 3 years since Sandy Hook, 3 years of almost daily bloodshed in our cities, the Republican Congress has done absolutely nothing to prevent the next massacre." Well, Senator Murphy, I again have to respectfully disagree. I really don't think your children are in any danger, considering the amount of security officers that surround them every single day. What Vox is trying to do here is push the narrative that with the more guns, the less safe a population is. But that is not borne out in the statistics. More and more Americans are owning firearms, and violent crimes are going down continuously. Europe is experiencing a new kind of crime, one in which the victim is totally defenseless. And why are they defenseless? Because they're not guaranteed the fundamental right of self-preservation through owning of a firearm. And the criminals know this. And the criminals don't mind breaking the law, hence they're called criminals. So they'll go buy an illegal firearm. What Vox is really saying is in order to prevent 92 gun deaths in America every day, or 30,000 gun deaths every year, we really have to just ban guns entirely. It's not politically correct to come out and simply just say that, but when you read between the lines and actually listen to the context and think about what the actual solutions could possibly be, you're only left with one choice: ban all guns. Thankfully, our founding fathers realized the necessity of the population to be armed to be able to protect itself, not only from criminal populations, but also from a tyrannical government, was absolutely necessary, and will always be absolutely necessary. It wrote it into the founding documents. It is the Second Amendment and Bill of Rights. It's probably one of the most important amendments of the Bill of Rights. Without this right, the American people are less safe and in danger. Remember the words of George Washington. When government takes away its citizens' rights to bear arms, it becomes the citizens' duty to take away the government's right to govern. If you like this video, please consider subscribing or send us a message on Facebook. We will be updating regularly.